Hello, founders. I'm here with Frances Tang, and she is the founder and CEO of Awkward Essentials. We are going to, as the name implies, have some awkward conversations about some essential things that all founders want to talk about, as well as some other really fun subjects. I'm really looking forward to this. So I want to say thank you so much, Frances, for being able to share and coming and joining us. For all the founders that want to learn about this, there's some particular details that we're going to be discussing about this type of startup and everything like that. But first, let's get it all out of the way because everybody wants to know, Frances. So, revenue and how much money have you raised so far?
Hey Ed, excited to be here. We have raised 2.3 million in seed, and for revenue, our first full year of operation was actually last year, and we did over 1 million, which was pretty.
Absolutely fantastic. Okay, so we understand the scope that we're getting into. So I'm just going to scroll through your website right here, Awkward Essentials, and this is what I've been tracking your company for a while because I became total fan of the way you position your company and branding. You are the creator of the drip stick, and I've actually had women come to me and I've mentioned your name and I've said, I'm going to have an interview with Frances. And they're like, you mean the creator of the drip stick?
No way.
Yeah, it's actually happened. And I said, I have to admit, I said, what's the drip stick?
Okay, well, that's fine.
That's what happened. So we're going to just scroll through this and we're going to talk about just what you've done and the reason. I also saw that you were a finalist for Fast Company's Innovative Ideas That'll Change the World. That what they do over there, and this just and we were talking before this. I heard your backstory, what you came up with it, and the whole Twinkie thing. I just fell in love with it as soon as I saw this and the messaging, everything that you're doing with your brand. And this is going to be a fun conversation. I'm so excited for this and very appreciative of you being part of the startups.com community and doing this with the founders and for the founders. I'm sure this will be highly educational. So, how about we start off? What is Awkward Essentials in your words?
Awkward Essentials. Well, okay, dripstick is this crazy idea that I had in my brain that I had no idea if it would even work. And Awkward Essentials is a company that was built around it to address basically behind the bathroom door problems, right? Like we all do like weird shit in the bathroom, like you close the door and you're just like doing things like whether it's like taking a pair of tweezers to your crotch to like pick out ingrown hair or after sex cleanup or like pee related, poop related, whatever. There's all kinds of weird things that happen back there, but no one really talks about it. And so our core, the main product is Dripstick, the product that I created. And so we kind of use it as almost like a doorstop to like open up that conversation about just strange things that are never discussed. And we're hoping to expand the product line to other just solutions for those weird things that happen.
Okay. And we were in a conversation before, we were talking about sort of the sex tech, femtech industry. And you made a very interesting delineation about how other femtech or sex tech, those products focus on a particular application or segment of the industry, if you will, but you really want to be different. And so how about you explain sort of the way that you see an underserved market or conversations or something that we're not addressing?
So there's so many incredible sex tech and femtech companies out there. We know a handful of them and we love them. We're friends with them. We support them. But I guess the way that I see it is a lot of those companies are based in like pleasure, which is fantastic. But cleaning up cum after sex is not like fun. It's not pleasurable. It's very utilitarian, right? And so that's honestly why we take the humor approach, because I feel like humor is almost like a universal icebreaker. So someone who can relate to us can laugh along and say like, oh yeah, I totally hear where you're coming from. Or someone who maybe doesn't have the problem or doesn't need the product or it's just not an issue for them, which is totally fine, can laugh and just say, okay, this girl has cum problems, but that's not my deal. So it's fine. So the reason why we do use humor is just because it's not like a fun thing. It's very utilitarian. It's not talked about in in movies, in TV, and romance novels, even in porn, like you don't see it happen.
For
And
sure.
so we really had to find an angle that would like resonate with people, whether or not they're willing to talk about it publicly.
Okay, so here's some principles that we can look at. First is we always tell our founders, look for an underserved niche or market that would be ideal for you. Look for the gaps which you found. And then you're talking about the go-to-market strategy, which for something like this, the branding is so important. And my question then is, first, let's take a look. How did you come up with the product? I was asking you before, like, is this your education? Like, did you study this in school? You came up with this product. How?
So baking, I love baking. I actually worked in a commercial kitchen for a short period of time. And so every time that I was using like a rubber spatula to scrape cake batter out of a bowl, cake batter is very thick. I would think like, wow, it'd be so fantastic to have a spatula for my vagina where I could just get everything out in like one fell swoop and not have to deal with it. Because I think like most founders that are solving for a problem that they have had, like you've done research, you've looked it up so many times. I've gone down like Reddit rabbit holes and Yahoo Answer rabbit hole. Yahoo Answers doesn't even exist anymore. And everyone was saying like use a wipe or a rag or an old t-shirt or something, which is great if that works for some people. But for me, I'm like, it's inside. And so how can we just like attack the problem at the source in a more efficient manner? That's just honestly how my brain was working. And so every time I would scrape cake batter out of a bowl with a rubber spatula, I'm like, this is like an efficient way to do it. Be great if we could translate this over into my vagina after sex. And so that's how it happened. Dripstick is not a rubber spatula. It's a medical grade sponge. And the way that I created it, I thought about what already existed. So what already exists that is safe for the vaginal canal. So just how can I jump off of the time and energy and capital and resources that have been put into other products first? Because I don't have that time or capital or energy. And so the basis for it is the contraceptive sponge. So the contraceptive sponge is something that existed a while ago. I don't think it's still exists, but I knew that I needed something porous because what it's trying to solve for is more viscous than like a tampon, which is trying to solve for blood. And so I looked at the contraceptive sponge and what that was made out of. And then it turns out it was the same material as non-latex condoms. So I knew it was also safe for vaginal use from like a couple different, so there was like thought put into it. I know it seems like a relatively simple product, but it took a while to like track down a medical manufacturer, figure out what would make sense, and even talk to people about it and see if there was a market, which was its own thing.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask next. So let's take a look here. And again, you're positioning it. I have to believe you had some interesting reactions. So my question is, how many people said to you, that's a dumb idea? How many were appalled? How many said, that's an amazing idea? Like, you're doing customer discovery. Obviously, you're going to talk about it and
Yeah.
float it out there. What was the reactions like? And like, how is it all divided?
It was hard. So when I started, I did a really small accelerator in LA called Grid 110. Incredible accelerator, highly recommend. And it was an idea to prototype accelerator. So I didn't have anything in hand, and very much the rhetoric and the education, which I agree with, is to prove out the concept before you invest a bunch of your capital into it. And so I would be pitching, and the faces in the room, like 50% were horrified. Like I can remember very clearly a couple of my friends in the accelerator, and they were just like, oh, this girl is nuts. And then the other half of the room was like laughing, but I don't know if they were laughing like with me or at me, like who knows. And so over time in perfecting that pitch, there actually was a guy in the accelerator who was an actor. And so we talked about injecting humor into the pitch, and that's what ended up happening. I think it ended up being like 50% stand-up comedy, 50% like just the pitch itself. And it worked so much better. It worked so much better to just relate it to myself. So people didn't feel like I was attacking them, or like didn't feel like I was saying that they were having sex, whether or not they have kids or were or weren't. It just, I had to take a different approach, because like a lot of pitches are like, oh, raise your hand if you've ever experienced like stress about this, or like get the audience to participate. But the audience did not want to participate and raise their hand and be like, yes, I get jizzed in. And so because of that, I really had to shift just the way that I was talking about things. And then, I mean, even at the end of the accelerator, I had people come up to me and say, oh my gosh, I thought it was a wipe, or I thought it was a suction machine, or like I didn't understand and still don't quite understand. So I didn't listen to the advice, and I went and I got the prototype done. And so I had 20,000 of these sponges that I stored at my parents' house, like most founders.
Okay, wait. So let's back up. I always like to pull out principles that other founders can learn from. First, you already demonstrated it. For example, if you're standing in front of people and say, we're going to basically take a sponge and stick it into your vagina, you don't use that language. You basically said it's for me. And so storytelling is a major component. Now you inject humor. That's not always going to apply for every startup, but you learn how to tell a story, capture people with a narrative, which is a very underrated founder skill. And so having an actor explain that to you, you clearly picked that up extremely well. There had to have been a moment though, where you sense that I'm onto something. There's validation to go and, create 20,000 prototypes, if you will. What was that moment in you? Like, was it a gut feeling, a conversation? What sparked that? I'm going to do it.
Okay, so I think this is a female founder problem, but we like to plan and make things perfect. And so I will completely admit I was in this rut. We're like, okay, how do I make the website better? How do I make the pitch better? How do I do this? But it wasn't actually that next step. And so honestly, what it was my dad. My dad is also a founder. I guess it is a disease that runs in the family. And so he was like, hey, okay, are you just like gonna keep talking about it? Are you actually gonna do it? And I'm like, no, I'm doing this thing. And he's like, you're not actually doing anything. So I'm like, fine. I will like invest and just get that prototype in hand. And the MOQ was the minimum order quantity, like the smallest amount I could get was 20,000. So I had 20,000 of these manufactured. And that was, I mean, a very scary moment for me, right? Because for me, that was a lot of money. I mean, compared to launching like a SaaS product or something that's more engineered, it wasn't that much. But at that time, it was taking a big risk because I had no idea. But I did slowly start to have more conviction that once I had the product in hand and people saw it, they would understand, like they would be able to connect the dots.
Yeah, for sure. And so we don't recommend printing 20,000 of anything,
I don't
but
either.
that was the minimum order quantity. So that makes a lot of sense that you had to go that route. And so then you take this, and then what did you do after? You got 20,000 of these. Your parents are amazing parents, by the way, to support you in that journey. Store all that. I can just imagine the conversations that are going around in your family. Then what did you do after that? You have 20,000 of these.
So I come from a marketing background, so I'm like marketing brain. And because I've had so many jobs and have kind of dabbled in a little bit of everything, I was able to set up like, okay, a basic email capture, a basic Shopify website, an Instagram account, a Facebook account, just kind of putting a presence out there, because knowing that just having a website wasn't good, my product's not going to sell to just have a website. How are people going to find me? So I kind of put these things in place. And once I had them in place, I started going out to events and trying to get feedback. And people did not understand how the product worked. And so I'm like, okay, how do I do a demo video of this product? And so I looked up a plastic anatomical clear vagina on Amazon. So expensive, by the way. Oh my, I could not afford it. And I was like, okay, I need to do a demo, but I can't afford this vagina. It's not gonna work. And so that is where the Twinkie thing came up. And so
Wow.
that Twinkie filmed with an iPhone, right? And so like I did a little GIF of just showing the sponge absorbing cream from a Twinkie. This is like a little bit better version of that GIF, but
Sure.
I have the original one is exactly the same, right? It's just me hovering over my white coffee table with an iPhone, trying to show how it takes the cream out of the Twinkie. And so I put that on the Shopify website, and it's so funny. I launched the Shopify website actually the same night I met Will. I was at I went to a dinner and Will was there. And I had like pushed go on the website and I was like, okay, well, nothing. I'm prepared to ship maybe if I'm lucky 10 for the month. Like I have no idea. And I remember Will was like, wow, you're like at this dinner and you just launched your website. And I'm like, like I really don't, I don't have any capital for marketing. And so I had posted it on a few Facebook groups to get some feedback, right? Like, can I get some feedback? Does this make sense? Like, are you understanding how the product works? Like a couple women's Facebook groups. And I remember going to bed that night. And then I woke up the next morning and I had like all these notifications on my phone. And I'm like, what is happening? And I noticed that there was a DM from Facebook from a writer in the UK, Huffington Post UK. So she had like done an article about this product while I was asleep because they're on a different time zone and essentially broke the story,
Yeah.
whatever story there was first. And so it spread through the UK press like crazy. I wasn't even shipping to the UK, mind you. So it spread to UK. We got all that press and then it slowly seeped into the US. So that first week, there was about 30 different PR articles on this product that I had just created that I was shipping out of my parents' house. So classic startup story. I had to like invite my friends over to help ship and pack and teach me how to correctly use like a tape gun because I was not prepared to ship out this many. So that was the proof of concept that I really needed to know that people were willing to actually put down a credit card and buy this thing. And then the DMs that I got, I think really helped push me forward, right? Like, oh my goodness, this is something I've experienced my entire life. I've never talked to anyone about it. I thought I was the only one. I thought I was alone. And so that was it was really nice. And knowing people were willing to put down a credit card, incredible. And so the second piece of the puzzle for me was, were they going to buy again? Like, was it going to be kind of like a 2-star thing? Like, it could be better. Okay, need to iterate. Or was it actually okay as an MVP and people were willing to purchase again? And then once I saw people were willing to purchase again, that was when I went out to go look for funding because I knew we had to move quickly.
Perfect. And one of the things we tell founders, the best feedback that you're going to ever get is after they see the price of something. You tell them the price. And so you're looking at how much have you jiggered around with the pricing optimization. How much have you done that?
I priced it kind of based on tampons, like knowing that that was the kind of like the threshold area. I've kind of gone back and forth, like shipping, pack sizes. I mean, we have a 69, okay, we have a 69 pack and like a 100 pack. The 69 pack was actually a joke. Like I did not think, I was like, this is so funny, right? And so like, I listed a 69 pack and people were like buying it. And there, I remember seeing like still shipping out of my parents' house, like orders from the same person who would like order a 69 pack. And I'm like, this is insane. And so I think going up in pack size was how I was looking at experimenting with pricing. Like would people be willing to buy in bulk? And the answer is yes. It's crazy.
For sure. Yes, we always make jokes, and that's the humor part of it, right? Every time we see a 6 and a 9 out there, we look and we go 6-9, nice. Like that's just the joke that we have out there. But what you're doing is you're seeing what type of repeat business, how much traction that you're going to get, will they buy in bulk, and then you're analyzing unit economics. So, question for you: were you naturally adept at analyzing unit economics, or did you get help? And like, how do you then start learning the business aspect of getting to profitability and what my margins are and all that good stuff?
It was super rudimentary. So it was very much like the common sense, like, okay, this is how much money that I'm spending here. And then this is how much I'm making. So minus the expenses. And so we're in a better place where I do have a numbers person that is extremely helpful to have. But I think like Shopify, it's not bad. I mean, it's not ideal. It's not the best dashboard, but it does have things that are really helpful, like conversion rate and total number of customers, and just having an email list set up and having a Facebook pixel set up. Facebook wasn't that bad at that time. Now it's just kind of a dumpster fire.
Mhm. Okay, absolutely. So, but you did pay attention, which is important. Let me ask you this question. This is what I find interesting about you. That's a little separate, and just the way that you're occurring on this. And I know you're going to share your story and you're using all the storytelling. But I'm reading this quote here, and one, it's adding that humor, but you talk from yourself. Like this is your quote. This is you, and you're kind of playing the whole celebrity CEO card, if you will. Like you're putting yourself and you're making yourself part of the brand. What's that like?
It was not intentional. I did not want to be the face of the cum sponge on the internet, right? Like I was pretty nervous, but given that the final pitch I did at that accelerator, coming from my personal point of view, was just so much more relatable for people,
Sure.
I just translated that into the brand. So the brand is my personality on the internet, and it's my immature sense of humor. It's directly translated, right? And so um I've I found that it's kind of this interesting thing where I go back and forth. Our customer base is really kind, and they really like that they can email me and I'll email them back. But I've also found that in our peaks of virality, it's not me, it's our employees. So like one of our employees will make like a TikTok and it'll go super viral, and it's literally them talking about the product. Or some random person from the Midwest just got out of the shower with their bonnet on, will be talking about the product and it'll go viral. So I think it's a strange thing because I have this like founder title. And so, yes, it's relatable, but it's not as relatable as an employee who like works here.
Wow, that's really interesting. So you got your employees, which is really great. Your employees involved. But again, I got to point out, you're establishing that culture. If you're not going to be vulnerable and you're not putting yourself out there, your employees don't feel permission to do it either. So you've created a culture where everybody can get involved in what's going on.
That's true. The conversations we have internally are pretty weird.
Now, are you rewarding, acknowledging, incentivizing your employees to do this type of stuff, or is it just something everybody does? How does that work?
So anyone who even I think interviews here, they have to have a sense of humor. Like there's
Mhm.
no way they're gonna be like, I'm gonna apply for a job at the cum sponge company and like not be aligned with our humor.
Mhm.
And so that in itself is like the first like way to sift out people, because they just like won't be comfortable.
For
And
sure.
then I think one of the first interview questions that we actually do ask is like, why do you want to work for a cum sponge company? Right.
Mhm.
And then are they uncomfortable when I ask that? Or are they like, oh no, I love the humor, I love this, I love that. So to work for a startup in the first place, you have to be a little bit of crazy. But to work for a company like this, you have to be a little bit more crazy. And so it's like self-filtering because the personality is so strong.
And you've established that culture. I explain all the time to founders. I say culture is what you do to get customers to love your brand, but then also the what you do to get your employees to live the brand as well. So it's all integrated, and looks like you've been establishing that, whether you intentionally did or it's just naturally it's come out. It's working for you and it's served you really well. How many employees do you have?
So there's four of us total. We're a pretty
Okay.
lean team at the moment. We've kind of gone back and forth and fluctuated. To what you were just saying, I think leaning really strongly and unapologetically into the personality of the brand has been really key, because I found that people respond directly to our emails very casually, like we're their friend. We have a Facebook group with like over 2,000 people in it. And I think everyone in that group is like a clone of me, to be honest. Like when I see some of the posts and stuff, I'm like, wow, and so I think with a strong brand personality, you become like this lighthouse for other people who are similar.
For sure. You're creating brand advocates out there, which is one fantastic way, because they'll promote and work for you and represent your brand for free.
Yeah.
Whereas everybody else is paying a lot of money to get an army of 2,000 people spreading the message for them. So kudos to you. Let me ask you about this then. So I see all this press that you've been getting, and just the PR, getting featured. I'm sure there's a lot more, but then you talk about having these conversations and making things less awkward, which is great. You probably even picked up. What are you doing, and maybe some advice for founders to get this type of press and exposure?
I think it's the kind of the answer I just gave, like leaning really heavily into this personality, such
Mhm.
that it's a little bit different than some of the other sexual wellness brands on the market. I mean, we love all the other folks in our space and they're incredible, but we just have a different approach to it. And I think the PR, like press people have noticed. And then also because the product is somewhat controversial, like we can't really be put in a box, right? We're not necessarily sex, but we're not necessarily hygiene. We're not period care. And we're very outspoken about what we do.
It makes for a good story too, which is
Mhm.
what the press is looking for. So you've got a great story. Are you actively contacting press, or are you just waiting for it to for them to pick you up?
The first flood of press that we had, that was, I mean, that was just organic and they picked us up. Um, and then we did have a PR agency. So it has
Okay,
been helpful to just help craft that story too and make sure that the messaging is correct because there can be a lot of misunderstanding about our product.
for sure. Now let's talk about going out and raising investment. You've mentioned comments before, and this is just a reality. Female founders is one thing, right? You're also a solo founder. And so to go out and raise the amount of venture capital that you have raised, that's no small task. So here you are, you've got traction, you validated the market, you got sales. What did you do next to go get investment money, because you did want to move as quickly as possible?
Okay, so I actually really like talking about this because I haven't quite heard this strategy elsewhere. So the typical advice is to like go to your contact or to your networks, like talk to people. I didn't have anyone to talk to, and it was really hard. And so I went to like, startup events, networking events, and I wasn't like finding people that made sense or wasn't able to find those connections. So what I ended up doing was I got access to PitchBook through the accelerator I was a part of. But PitchBook is very expensive. So if you don't have access to PitchBook, that way you can find someone who is getting their MBA, because I hear that MBA students actually typically have PitchBook logins. So you could potentially borrow your friend's login. I logged into PitchBook and I looked up brands that were similar to us. So brands that had pretty like strong personalities, crazy humor, brands that were in the sexual wellness space, the period care space. And then I looked at who invested in them at the seed stage. And that was how I built my hit list. So looking for similar companies and then seeing who invested in them at the stage that I was in, that was my hit list. And then I went to every single website for all of those funds to see if their thesis was still aligned. Because maybe they invested in period care 3 years ago, but now they're like, we only invest in SaaS. And so not a good fit. And so just going through every single one, seeing what the fit was. And then I did a free trial of LinkedIn Premium, and I looked up every single one of those funds to see if I could find a mutual connection that could potentially connect me to someone at that fund, log that into my Excel sheet. And then that was how I started. And so after I exhausted all those warm intros, which there wasn't a lot, to be honest, I just started cold emailing people. And so our seed round came from a cold email.
Wow. And how long did it take, beginning to end, before you got the check in the bank?
It honestly wasn't super long because it was very narrowed down. So our current investors, they had actually invested in Tushy, and Tushy has very similar branding to us. They like investing in unusual products, and the thesis on their website literally said early stage founders, strong brands, unusual products. And so I'm like, this seems like a good fit. And so it was. So it was very quick because it was narrowed down to a good fit.
Okay. We got to break this down, because it's amazing what you just shared, process step by step. And I'm sure if founders are watching this, should go back, rewind it, play it slow motion, and write everything down, because it's exactly what we recommend. But let's talk about this for a moment. we use PitchBook and we help founders with their research, et cetera. We tell founders, if institutions, capital, VCs aren't going to look at you, the alternative is to go with personal contacts, friends, family, and associates around, et cetera. You happen to be sitting on something that was getting press, lots of validation, and what have you. So you could take that route. My question would be, how much did you consider taking money from more personal connections? Or have you? Because I'm sure people have come to you and said, hey, can I get in on this deal?
I mean, now they are, but that early on, it was definitely taking a chance on a girl with a crazy idea.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So you needed to find that VC that believed in this and was willing to take a risk on it and could understand how the industry works and the really asymmetric upside that comes with investing in startups.
Yeah, because I mean, to be completely honest, I I get it, right? There's risk in investing. So an investor is likely going to want to invest in something that they've seen proven out in the past, or like with a similar business model that they can understand. I'm out here like, hey, I made this cum sponge. Yeah, there's no one else doing it, which is typically a bad sign. If no one else is doing it, which is still something that kind of scares me, even though we're doing very well, I'm just like, okay, how come no one else has done it? Is it a brand thing? Is it the moment in time or like culture and society, like now we're ready for it? I don't know if it's a timing thing. I don't know if it's a messaging thing, a branding thing. But the advice is like, if no one's doing it, there's probably a reason why.
Mm-hmm.
And so I totally get it. I mean, even at that time, even though there was some press and some sales, it's very risky because it hasn't been proven out. And so now that we've been established longer, now we have people coming to us.
Mm. Yeah, that's very interesting on perceptions and how it works. And not all investors are equal, obviously. So if you're talking to different people who have different investment history or their own investment theses, they're going to be looking at your opportunity a lot different. For other investors, like for myself, when I'm looking, if they're, I ask that very same question, why hasn't someone done this before? And if there's lots of resistance and this is a really dumb idea, or there's lots of reasons why you shouldn't, I actually get more interested, because if you can figure out and solve that problem, it's a huge, massive market. It's the blue ocean, if you will. So I think you kind of caught all that combined with your personality going out there, and it just all kind of came together for you. What's it like? How's it feel knowing that you've pulled this off as female founder? You're baking one day, you come up with this idea. Like, what's it like? Just, what's going through your mind? What's the emotional state?
It's weird. I mean, I still feel the same, right? I'm still stressed out all the time and like worried about things. Um, and I think that if I were to tell myself 5 years ago that I would be here, there's no way I would believe it. Or when I was trying to find a full-time job during a recession and I kept having all these ideas, if I were to tell myself back then, like, yeah, no, you're going to raise VC funding and create this thing, I'd be like, what? There's no way. But I guess as founders, you always want to get to the next step, right? And so I think that is typically what is going through my mind, like, what are we going to do next? Or how do we improve upon this? Or how do we do better for our customers? And so I still think I think the same way as I did then.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I love it. So let's go into a bullet round on advice. I'm going to name specific people or founders in a specific stage or a problem they might be facing, and you give me your best piece of advice. Okay.
Wait, okay. Can I preface this by saying the best piece of advice that I have, I guess, learned on my own and also heard from Will, not flattering Will on purpose, but seriously, is like, advice is not it's really hard to qualify advice. So even when I was going out and getting advice, no one truly knew the business as well as I did, or like the market as well as I did, right? So I was getting stuff, I'm like, yeah, I've tried that, or like, this is why it doesn't work. So it's like a tough thing. Like, the best advice I think you can get is someone who actually understands your vertical, because then they know the different nuances and challenges that really affect that advice.
For sure. what you're doing is you're actually giving advice about advice. It's like meta advice, right? And
Yeah.
Will, who happens to be the CEO of startups.com, he's great at giving meta advice, right? And
Yeah.
so let's take a meta perspective on this. Okay. So I'm gonna do this. Let's just try it. So what would you say to the founder out there that says, hey, I have this crazy idea and I don't know what to do with it. Should I do it? Should I not do it? Etc. What meta advice would you give?
Okay, I don't know if this is meta. I actually have a direct piece
Okay,
of advice here. There is a Reddit thread for everything. Okay, like
that's great.
that's what I'm saying. There's literally a Reddit thread for anything you can think of. It is nuts. And so what you can do is search for what you have in mind, or like the topic or the problem on Reddit, and see what people are saying there. And if you're nice and sincere enough, you can actually DM them and they'll respond. That's actually one way I did market research, because there wasn't data or statistics about how much people are getting jizzed in. And so I had to just go out there and like do informal surveys on my own. And one way that I did it was via Reddit, like looking for people talking about this. And so because there's a thread for everything, I think almost any issue or problem that you're thinking of that you might want to solve can be found there.
Okay. So do research, talk to people, get out there, take
Yeah,
a
no one's
stroll.
gonna steal your idea.
Okay. That's another really important aspect.
You do have copycats though. People are 100% stealing my idea, but
Yep.
I mean,
But which is the reason that you build a brand, and that's going to create sort of that competitive advantage for you, that you're out there. And which, again, my understanding, you're patent pending, right?
mhm.
Okay. So that's fantastic. So get out there, do some research. What you have demonstrated for me is you're just very curious. Why? Like, why hasn't it been done, etc. You started doing a research, etc. Okay. Next, you're ready. Someone has the product, etc., and they're like, I'm feeling nervous. I'm going to put it out there. Maybe set up the Shopify account. What's the mindset? What advice would you give that person just before they're ready to launch?
You have to do the scariest things,
Mm,
um, which is actually like launch, or actually post it places, or actually talk to people. Like the things that scare you the most are probably the correct things that you should be doing at that moment in time.
how scary was it for you?
Um, Pretty scary. I mean, even a lot of my friends were like, "I don't really understand what you're doing." Right? Like founders are like a special kind of crazy. And so like even my closest friends, like, "I don't understand. Like this doesn't make sense to me." And so it's terrifying, right? It's your first child. You put so much time and work and energy into it. And then especially with the proliferation of social media, like people are going to shit all over you no matter what. And for us, I get it. We are controversial. We have a strong personality. We're talking about cum all the time. I totally get it. But even the other day, I was looking at a social account of like a dietitian, and there was like another chef like shitting all over her. And I'm like, okay, I get why it happens to us, but geez, it's happening to this dietitian. Like, are you serious? And so like, it just is, it's gonna happen. And it hurts. It like sucks.
Mhm.
But it's kind of inevitable.
And what did you do for emotional support? Like, just like, obviously it's tough for us to relate to either people who've got jobs or even just regular small business people. They just don't understand the reason you'd swing for the fences doing a startup when you could easily get a job, or do something a little more conservative, build a business plan, get a loan, all these things. So what did you do to get over that? And how did you create support systems, or are you just incredibly resilient and ate a lot of ice cream by yourself? Like, what happened?
Ice cream is my favorite food.
Okay.
I did do that. I tried to find people in this space, right? Because it's unique challenges that are in every space. It's very unique. And so I tried to find people in my particular space. And I was lucky to find a couple of other founders, many who I'm still friends with today. And then I think like a lot of damaged people, humor. So like the responses on social media, right? Just kind of responding back with humor, like with a gif or whatever, like let's joke back with you, because it is what it is, but it is really important to find someone you can talk to, because it's tough.
Yes, support, community, that's important. Okay, advice or meta advice that you have for someone in your situation, similar to yours, trying to raise money. What would you say?
Um, Probably the same thing that they've heard from many people. Don't raise if you don't have to.
Mm.
Know exactly why you are raising, like exactly why. So in our case, it was okay, we wanted to build a strong brand and move quickly because yes, there is IP, but it's not super proprietary. It's not like some algorithm or like something SaaS related. So moving fast made sense for us and building a strong brand. But it's hard. I mean, the investors you're talking to, try to talk to some of the portfolio companies, not the ones that they recommend, but like really stock down the ones that they don't tell you about, or maybe who didn't even make it, to really see what it's like working with them. Because it's like a having an investor is like having a baby daddy. It's not a marriage, it's a baby dad. Like you are never like that. The business is your child, they are your baby daddy. You're not going to get rid of them. They're with you for life. And so you can get a divorce if you're married. You can't divorce your baby daddy. And so it's really, really, really important to like do your due diligence on the investor.
I've never thought about it, baby daddy, having a baby daddy, but I can definitely see the connections there for sure. All right, to female founders, what would you say to female founders?
Okay, don't go to the funds that are just for female founders.
Interesting. Interesting. Why not?
So, like, yes, of course, if they are like the thesis is aligned with what you're doing, completely makes sense. But I think something, I wouldn't quite say it's a mistake, but I think a commonality between a lot of female founders, myself included, is we'll go for the female focused funds first, like especially if your product is in the space, right? Like thinking like, okay, those investors will understand, and because we can relate better because they're also women. But that isn't necessarily the case. And so in my personal experience, I kind of found that they're less willing to take a risk on what I was doing, which I think is also understandable because there's fewer female funds. They have to work harder to like do better, like to like have exits. And so something that's very risky is it might not be ideal for
For
them.
sure.
And so
Okay.
it's a weird thing. But if the thesis is aligned, absolutely.
Okay. What's it like? Let me share with you something personal. I want to ask you what it's like. I was with some female founders the other day, and they had to have a discussion on whether they were going to include me in on their conversation. Like they actually talked. Should we let Ed in on this conversation? Which I understand, but a word came out. Someone called me an ally. And I had mixed emotions about that. I'll just come clean with you and be transparent. On one, it's great, an ally, but the fact that you have to use the word ally or that word exists because there's a counter to that, and that's the enemy. So either you're an ally or an enemy. And I thought this is kind of sad that we have to talk about it that way. But what's been your experience with that sort of, you know, girl boss, woman power, girl power, type thing in startup land, because you're living it? What's been your experience and what's your opinion about things like that?
Um, I think it's really competitive. And so if I were to have it my way, everyone would like be nice to each other and help each other. But I mean, I have tried to approach both female and male founders that have either like not responded or like not really wanted to help or talk. So I don't think it's specific to whether you are a man or a woman. I think it just comes down to like, are you willing to have these conversations with another founder or not? Or maybe your head's down and you don't have the time, or maybe you see it as competition. I don't know.
What I'm hearing from you is it's really not an issue for you. You're not even thinking about it.
I mean, I guess, are you asking in terms of like investors or just like friends?
Just the whole state of startups okay, we can acknowledge in startups, there's a particular type of person and type thing that are predominantly, in Silicon Valley, et cetera. We talk about all this time. We talk about the diversity and equity issue, et cetera. I'm just curious, like, how much does that come into your life, and how much do you think about the issue, female founders, equality, all the gender stuff that happens, et cetera?
I mean, I do think that there aren't enough female founders, right? Like over 50% of the world is female, and we have our own unique, we're best positioned to attack our problems because we know and live them. And
Sure.
so, like, yes, I do think the imbalance in the startup community is a problem, because then a female founder is going to have a harder time finding like female talent, which if they're solving a problem for women, then it's like, well, it's better for the people on the team to understand what's being solved for. Not to say that a man cannot. We have some incredible dudes on our team. Like, they're great. They totally get it. So it is good to have a balance. But yeah, I think there's not enough of us. And so there's so many problems that can be attacked that just haven't been.
Yeah, that's great. I've actually never considered it from that standpoint about who's working on solving the problem. So that's a really interesting thing to have that as part of the way that you see how we can solve problems. Because yeah, not only are there's 51% women, or there's more than 50% women who could be working on these problems, but they have the problems. This is a market as well. So being able to have that on your team and to be able to relate. And I cherish female founders because they have a different perspective that I just, it's like being married. My wife will tell me things and I'll be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm just going to believe that you're right, because I will never be able to 100% relate to your perspective. And we've figured out how to make that work and trust each other in that way. And I think this is all about trust in working with each other, regardless of gender, and just building that trust.
Yeah. It's just there is a gender imbalance. And so it kind of like trickles down into everything else.
Yeah, I can see that happening. All right. You invoked Will, founder and CEO of startups.com. You invoked his name. Let's talk about him for a little bit, because I always enjoy hearing other people's perspective. I work with him every day. So what was it like, meeting Will? How has that helped being part of the startups.com community? Just walk us through your experience with our little merry band of pirates in our community trying to do some things in startup land.
Love the pirates. Very relatable. So it's wild. So I met Will right before I launched the site. And then I remember following up with him because I had started listening to the podcast. And so I think that his podcast is absolutely 100% the most honest startup podcast that is out there. Like, so honest. Every single, almost 100% of episodes, I think, is relatable to every founder because of the things that they're talking about. Like, there's this mental health, emotional side to being a founder that is not talked about enough. And so Will's podcast is the therapy session that doesn't exist. I have tried to find a therapist that understands the startup world, and it's really hard.
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah. Even my current therapist is like, I don't understand who like your investors. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know how to explain the entire like startup universe. And but the challenges are just so unique to us that was really helpful. And so I had followed up with him because I had been listening to his podcast, and that is how we reconnected and how I kind of got pulled into the community.
Mm-hmm. And what's it been like in the community? You've been around a lot longer than I have. I too came through because of the Startup Therapy podcast. I was at a very low moment. I had a big just falling out with a startup as a CEO, the board and the co-founders. I was at my lowest. I began listening, and it was a refreshing take as well. So that's how I came into the community. What's it been like, watching the startups.com community, and who have you connected with? And what are some stories that endear you to what Will was building?
So I was part of one of the original founder groups that he was testing out. And I mean, it was awesome. It was so nice to just have a space to talk to other people who are going through the same challenges and who are either like a few steps ahead of you or even like a few steps behind to say like, don't do this. I did this and fell into quicksand, you know? And so it was very much the live human iteration of the podcast, which I think was the intention. So it's really nice to know that there is an area and a community like the Slack channel where people will understand the current problem that you're going through or that you're having.
That's great. Well, this has been amazing. Like I said, I've been a fan, and it's kind of like I get to, they say be careful when you meet your heroes type thing. And I finally got to meet you, and it's been everything that I built up in my mind, which has been absolutely fabulous. I'm going to give you the last word for the founders who are watching this, our community, you've been around. What's one final piece of encouragement or something that you'd like to say?
It is really hard. 100%. I think so many of the stories revolve around the successes, and that's like the only thing you hear, right? You only like see the tip of the iceberg. But because a community like this exists, just like lean into it and use it, because like I said, it's very hard to find a therapist that understands the space.
100%. How should people get a hold of you? What's your invitation? Other founders? Obviously, you're busy, so we don't need to be inundating you and, stalking you any sort of way, but you seem super approachable, especially with the customers. What about other founders? What invitation would you give them?
Oh my God, totally email me. Okay, one more mini story. When I was starting, someone introduced me to a guy who had gone through YC, and I never met him. I like texted him every once in a while, but he was so kind and so open and so willing to answer my questions. And I will never forget this person. Shout out to James, Mighty Health. So if I can be that person to anyone else, like I am more than happy to do it, because I didn't know anyone who had gone through it. I didn't know anyone who had raised money. Like I didn't know how to find anyone. So I'm at francis@awkwardessentials.com. So just email me anytime, or we have a live chat on our website, and half the time it's me. So you can just like chat in and, or say like, hey, is Francis there? And then they can tag me in the ticket and I can like message you back. But I'm happy to help and be there, because there was someone that was there for me at those early stages, and I'm forever grateful.
Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for being an ambassador for the startup community and making yourself so open. I'm going to include all the information everywhere I post this. I'll include a way that people can get a hold of you, the other founders as well. And yeah, for everybody who's listening, I hope this has been very helpful. We're trying to bring stories from all different angles of the startup ecosystem so you can listen and learn, and then reach out, contact us. We're available for office hours to help all our founders. And Francis, once again, thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight. It's been a treat.
Thanks for having me, Ed.